Maybe. Maybe we should consider adoption? Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper as she pushed her barely touched dinner around her plate. Mark set down his fork and looked at her. He had suggested adoption before, multiple times, but Rachel had always clung to the hope of having a child naturally. She had fought for it, through endless appointments, tests, hormones, and heartbreak. He knew how hard this moment was for her. He reached across the table and gently took her hand. If you're ready, then I'm with you. All the way. In their marriage, conversations about children were as common as talks about vacations or job changes. For years, they clung to hope. Doctors came and went. So did procedures. Diagnoses shifted. Then came the IVF treatments. 1, 2, and after the last failed embryo transfer, Rachel simply crumbled. She spent an entire week in bed, curled up, not answering calls, barely eating. Mark didn't push. He didn't speak in cliches or try to fix it. He just stayed. So when she finally spoke those words, uncertain but resolute, he knew she had crossed the line where you stop waiting and start acting. I mean, there are kids already in this world, Mark had said months earlier, while drying the dishes. Kids who just need someone to choose them. Why not give them a real home? That was when their journey began. They started filling out paperwork, attending parenting workshops, passing home inspections, going through interviews with social workers. Rachel read forums late at night, cried over stories of failed adoptions and difficult bonding. Mark stayed steady, always calm, always hopeful. Our child is out there, he said one night, hugging her from behind as she stood staring out the kitchen window. We'll find them. You'll see. It was a Thursday afternoon when the social worker called. There's a little girl I think you should meet. Her voice was warm, almost excited. She's 6. Her name is Lily. Very quiet. Incredibly gentle. And her eyes, they remind me of yours, Rachel. They received a photo by email. A thin, fair-haired girl in a navy jumper, sitting cross-legged with a shy smile. She held up a drawing, a gingerbread house, a green-eyed cat, and a gray teddy bear with wings. Behind her, the playroom looked faded but clean. A few days later, Rachel and Mark drove to a small children's home near Portland, Oregon. Lily didn't run into their arms like in a movie. She was sitting in the corner of a carpeted room, drawing on a torn piece of construction paper. She glanced at them, but didn't move. Rachel crouched down beside her. Hi, Lily. I'm Rachel, and this is Mark. Lily looked up at them. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just nodded once. We heard you love to draw, Rachel said, offering a brand new set of markers and watercolor paints. Lily opened her worn backpack and quietly showed them a handful of drawings, the same gingerbread house, the same green-eyed cat, the flying bear, and now a rocket ship with stars. Wow, these are amazing, Mark said, leaning in. Lily watched him carefully, her face unreadable, as if waiting to see if he really meant it. From that day on, something shifted. They started visiting every weekend. They brought storybooks, warm cookies, tiny stuffed animals. They took Lily to a nearby park. Slowly, she began to speak more. At first, single words. Then little questions. One Saturday, she asked Rachel to braid her hair. That night, she fell asleep with her hand wrapped tightly around Rachel's finger. Mark sewed her a pillow in the shape of a rabbit. Rachel knitted her a blanket the color of early spring. When the paperwork was finalized, Lily hugged one of the caregivers tightly and whispered, I'll try to be good. And Rachel, watching her from the hallway with tears in her eyes, thought, this isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of everything. Lily barely spoke during her first week at home. She ate in silence, played in silence, listened to bedtime stories without interrupting. But she neatly folded her pajamas every morning, cleared her plate without being asked, and always whispered a soft good night before bed. Rachel didn't push her. She knew healing didn't happen on schedule, not for a child with Lily's past, and not for a woman still recovering from her own wounds. Mark, on the other hand, didn't like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. He invented bedtime stories where Lily was a brave explorer or a magical princess, and he, a talking dragon, a pirate captain, or a bumbling wizard who always needed rescuing. You have to crawl to the tower, Lily instructed one evening, pointing to the space behind the couch draped with blankets. I'm guarding the potion. Yes, ma'am, your royal highness, Mark said with a salute and fell dramatically to the floor, crawling on his elbows. Rachel watched them from the doorway, her arms folded. A smile tugged at the corners of her lips. She had been afraid Mark might get overwhelmed, or worse, lose interest. But no. He was patient, silly, fully present. And Lily? She was slowly letting him in. A month passed. One Sunday afternoon, they took a walk in the park just a few blocks from their neighborhood. It was sunny but breezy, the kind of day that smelled like green grass and ice cream trucks. Lily walked next to Rachel, wearing a light blue dress and the new sneakers her mom had bought her just last week. She held onto Rachel's hand tightly, barely speaking, watching the sidewalk with a furrowed brow. Mark chatted casually about work, about weekend plans, about fixing the garden hose. Every now and then, he glanced at Lily, trying to catch her eye, but she wouldn't meet his gaze. It wasn't like before. It felt intentional. "Lily," he said gently, "want to stop for ice cream?" She looked up at Rachel instead of answering. Her eyes searched her mother's face, and then, barely audible, she whispered, "Chocolate." Mark smiled. "Good choice. Be right back." He jogged over to the stand while Rachel knelt beside Lily. "You okay, sweetheart? You've been really quiet today." Lily's gaze dropped again. Then, so softly that Rachel had to lean in to hear, she said, "Don't trust him." Rachel blinked. "What, honey?" "Mark," Lily said, barely louder than before. "Don't trust him. He's bad. Just stay with me, okay?" Rachel's heart dropped like a stone. She stared at her daughter, unsure if she'd heard right. But Lily just looked away again, like nothing had happened. That night, when Lily was tucked into bed and the house had gone still, Rachel couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling for hours, those 5 words replaying in her mind like a loop. "Don't trust him. He's bad." She tried to ask Lily about it the next day gently, without pressure. But the girl clammed up, pulled the blanket over her head, and pretended not to hear. Every attempt was met with silence. Rachel eventually took her to a child therapist. After a long session and lots of cautious observations, the woman shrugged. "It's not unusual," the therapist said. "Children who've been through the system often have trouble forming trust with male figures. It might just be fear from her past. Be patient." Rachel nodded, thanked her, and left the office. But the unease in her chest didn't fade. It only grew louder. That afternoon, Rachel was supposed to pick Lily up from her after-school program, as always. But a bag of heavy groceries and an unexpected downpour changed her routine. She decided to drop everything off at home first. She unlocked the front door and stepped inside quietly, wiping rain from her shoulders. She wasn't expecting Mark home yet. But then she heard his voice. He was in the kitchen, on the phone, and didn't realize she was there. Rachel froze in the hallway. "Yeah," he said, laughing softly. "It's all working out. Just a couple more days. As soon as she signs the power of attorney, I'll handle everything." His voice didn't sound like his usual self. It was lighter, colder, excited. "Already found a buyer for the Vermont property. Can you believe it? That land's been sitting for years. This'll cover the move, and then some." Rachel's heart pounded in her ears. The Vermont property, that was hers. A quiet piece of land she'd inherited from her grandparents. It meant something. It was never for sale. She didn't move, barely breathed. "She has no idea," Mark continued. "Once the papers are signed, I'm free. It's almost too easy." At that moment, he must have heard her shuffle. His tone changed instantly. "Yeah, Mom, of course we'll come visit. Tell Dad hi. Gotta run." He turned around, phone down, a practiced smile already forming on his face. "You're home early," he said casually. Rachel forced a nod and stepped inside like nothing was wrong. "Rain caught me. Thought I'd drop the groceries first." She leaned up and kissed his cheek. Her face was calm, her hands steady. But inside, everything was on fire. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay awake in the dark, replaying his every word. The property, the papers, the lie, the betrayal, the possibility that he'd been pretending all along, playing the long game. Using her. Using Lily. The next morning, she contacted a private investigator. What he uncovered hit her like a freight train. Mark had been planning to sell the Vermont land behind her back. He had forged initial paperwork, found a shady buyer, and set up a quiet account to transfer the funds. He was counting on Rachel signing the authorization, disguised as insurance forms, to make the sale legal. And then he'd vanish. Take the money. Leave her and Lily behind. Rachel sat at her dining table with the report in her hands. She stared at the papers until her coffee went cold. She didn't cry. She made a plan. 2 days later, Mark came home early, humming to himself. "Hey, babe," he called cheerfully. "So, the insurance people are sending over the renewal forms today. I told them you'd sign. Same stuff as last time. Nothing complicated. He placed a stack of neat papers in front of her and offered her a pen. Rachel looked at him. Really looked. His face was calm. Too calm. Rehearsed. She picked up the forms. The first few pages were standard. But tucked in the middle, exactly as she'd feared, was the power of attorney. "You said you reviewed everything?" she asked sweetly. "Of course. I'm just trying to make your life easier, my queen," he said with a grin. Rachel smiled. Then, without a word, she tore the entire stack of papers in half. The pieces fluttered to the floor like snow. Mark's jaw dropped. "Are you insane?" he shouted, his mask slipping. Rachel stood. "I know everything," she said. Her voice was calm. "I see. The phone call. The plan. The land. The fake buyer. You were going to leave us." Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Then the excuses poured in. Panic, confusion, some nonsense about pressure, about making bad decisions under stress, about still loving her. She didn't flinch. She didn't believe a word. All she saw was a stranger. Within a week, Mark was gone. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just a single suitcase, a long silence, and a finalized divorce filing on Rachel's part. She didn't need a dramatic exit. She needed freedom and protection for herself and for Lily. Lily didn't ask questions. She just watched. She saw how Rachel stopped humming while cooking, how she stared out the window too long, how her phone buzzed with messages that she ignored. She noticed the way her mother's eyes looked tired even when she smiled. One rainy evening, they sat together under a thick blanket on the couch, watching an old animated movie. Rachel sipped tea. Lily clutched her favorite stuffed owl. Neither said much. When the credits rolled, Lily didn't move. She stayed curled against Rachel's side, quiet. Then she whispered, "It's my fault, isn't it? That he left." Rachel froze. "What?" "I didn't like him. And I told you he was bad. If I was nicer, maybe he would have stayed." Her voice was so small, so heartbreakingly serious, that Rachel felt tears sting her eyes. She turned to face her daughter, cupping her face in both hands. "Lily, sweetheart, none of this is your fault. Not one single part." Lily didn't speak. She just blinked, eyes round and full. "Mark was not the person we thought he was," Rachel said, steady and clear. "He lied to me. He tried to hurt us. And you," she paused, voice trembling just a little, "you were the brave one. You saw something I didn't, and you tried to warn me." Lily's lower lip quivered. "But I didn't know for sure." "You knew enough," Rachel said. "And I'm so proud of you." Lily finally exhaled. A long, shuddering breath. "You're not going to send me back?" Rachel's heart cracked open. "Back where?" "No. Lily, no. You're my daughter. My forever. There's nowhere else for you to be but with me." She pulled the girl into her arms, and this time, Lily didn't hold back. She cried, the deep, shaking kind of cry that kids hold in when they've been afraid for too long. Rachel held her through all of it, rocking gently. They stayed that way for a long time, the rain tapping the windows and the house wrapped in quiet. Later that night, after brushing her teeth and putting on pajamas, Lily stood in the hallway holding her drawing pad. "Can I hang this on the fridge?" she asked. Rachel smiled and took it. It was a crayon drawing of a house. A small house with big windows. Inside were two stick figures, one taller, one smaller, both with hearts drawn in their chests. Above it, in big letters, she had written, "Home is where Mom is." Rachel taped it to the fridge door with trembling hands. For the first time in months, she slept soundly. A year later, the seasons turned with a gentler rhythm. Rachel had left the city apartment long ago. She and Lily now lived in a modest cottage outside Asheville, North Carolina, tucked among rolling hills, quiet trees, and the kind of neighbors who waved every morning just because. The house wasn't big, but it was theirs. It smelled like fresh coffee and lavender. The porch creaked when you stepped on it. The mailbox had a tiny red flag that Lily insisted on checking every afternoon, even when they weren't expecting anything. Lily had changed. She still wore her hair in braids, but now they bounced as she ran. She had started drawing comic strips and stapling them into books. Her teachers said she had a gift for storytelling. She laughed easily. She made friends. She fell asleep without a nightlight. Rachel had changed, too. She no longer flinched at the sound of the door unlocking. She no longer kept everything bottled up. She worked part-time at a local bookstore, where she ran a weekly story hour. And in the evenings, she and Lily baked muffins or built pillow forts or just sat together with warm mugs and fuzzy socks. There was no big romance. No new man. Just peace. Just healing. One Saturday morning, As they sipped cocoa and listened to a record crackle through the old player Rachel had found at a garage sale, Lily asked, "Mom, when did you know everything would be okay?" Rachel thought for a moment. Then she smiled. "When you asked for chocolate chip pancakes the morning after. That's all it took? That was the first time you let me see your favorite." Lily giggled. "I still love them." "I know." Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Birds moved in quick bursts from branch to branch. The house creaked in the way old, lived-in houses do, like it was breathing with them. On the fridge, Lily's old drawing still hung. Home is where Mom is. And Rachel, sitting beside her daughter, felt it in every inch of her being. They had made it. They were safe. They were whole.